Welcome back. I'm Miss Newroth, and today we are talking about Malthusian theory. What are you going to learn today? First of all, who is this Thomas Malthus person and what's his theory all about? We are going to explore a theory of population growth and decline. Thomas Malthus's theory on the principles of population. We are also going to take a look at critiques of his theory today. Let's get to know this Malthus guy. He lived a long time ago, between 1766 and 1834, and he was a British economist. Now, why is he special? Well, we remember him today and we choose to talk about him in AP Human Geography because he's the first person credited with really starting to raise the alarm about population growth and the problems with outpacing food production. Let's get into the basics of his theory. So Thomas Malthus warned that population would outpace food supply. This is because population grows geometrically, while food supply only grows arithmetically. And you can see those illustrated here on the timeline I've created. Malthus made his predictions in the years after Britain entered stage 2 of the demographic transition model. If you remember in the previous lessons, you learned that stage 2 is this period of time with explosive population growth, where the death rate drops and the birth rate remains high. So we see large numbers of people being added to the population. This created a huge concern for Malthus because he saw that when population outpaces food supply, that is a point of crisis. This is when we have starvation. This is when chaos can erupt because no longer can we take care of the entire population. So he was trying to raise the alarm that in time, there would not be enough food for the people of Britain. Now, at the time, not everybody believed that Malthus was right. In fact, he had a lot of critics who thought that he was just a little crazy, maybe a little, in today's world, he'd be a little bit of a conspiracy theorist. There were some people who saw the validity in his arguments at the time, but he also had quite a few critics, both at home and abroad. You can see in the image that I've put here, it's a historical document, actually, that was circulating in France at the time, basically debunking Malthus' theory. And part of the reason people were really against him is because there weren't a whole lot of places at that time that were actually entering into stage 2. So they didn't see the kind of concern on the horizon that Malthus may have seen in his time in his particular place. Not only that, but some religious groups saw him as too alarmist and anti-family, trying to encourage people to have less children within some circles at this time would have been seen as maybe even anti-patriotic. You're not producing children for the country that you live in, and you're not producing children as a religious obligation. So there was a lot of pushback against Malthus's ideas at the time. However, we still talk about him because there are a lot of people who still see the validity in Malthus's ideas for our world today, particularly because of this incredibly dramatic increase in world population in the 20th century, exponential population growth. These people who still ascribe to Malthus's ideas are called neo-Malthusians, or sort of the new Malthusians. And they point to the dramatic loss in Earth's natural resources, coupled with unprecedented population growth, as an indicator that Malthus's ideas are still very relevant today, and that it is still possible for us to hit that crisis point if we are not able to produce more food or reduce our population growth. So we're going to do a little practice here. You have the basics of Malthus theory. Let's think about how this might apply in our world today. I have here one of the FRQ questions from the AP Human Geography exam in 2011. Now, this is in the older style of the exam, but it's still very worthwhile to explore because it asks us to analyze his theory. This is an important skill that you're building in this course. So it says, in 1798, Thomas Robert Malthus published an essay on the principle of population in which he argued that population growth will inevitably outpace food production, resulting in widespread famine. So they give you his theory right there in the question. Be on the lookout when you're starting to do these FRQ practices and even start testing with these. There may be some hints or some information provided for you in the initial statement. So never skip over that. There's always nuggets of help there, of information that could be very helpful for you when you're answering the question. So part 1 says, identify and explain 2 reasons why some geographers today believe Malthus' theory can be used to predict future population issues. Now part 2 is the flip side of this. Identify and explain 2 reasons why some geographers today believe Malthus' theory cannot be used to predict future population. You're essentially saying, here are the reasons why Malthus is right, and then here are the reasons why he's wrong. You're analyzing his theory and being able to see how some of his ideas would still hold true today and would challenge some of his ideas with the new information we have in this century. So if you'd like to, pause the video now and take a moment to sketch out what you think you might say in response to this question. I'll go over the answer here in the next slide. So what could you say? Here's a very condensed version of the rubric for this question, but it might give you an idea if you're on the right track. So in part 1, we're being asked to say why Malthus is right in today's world. What evidence do we have that supports his theory? So first we have to identify. And as a whole, population and food production are growing as Malthus predicted. Population is growing exponentially while food production is typically only growing arithmetically. Now, what would explain this in the world today? Well, we have limited use of contraception or birth control in certain parts of the world. There are political, economic, and or cultural policies or ideas that still promote population growth in certain parts of the world. Some places still have tremendous value in producing large families, and that ideal and that ethic has not gone away. We also discussed how certain population policies may encourage people to have more children. Some countries are still in stage 2 or 3 of the DTM, as you learned in the previous lesson. So if they're still in that state, they are still experiencing very high population growth. Now, if we go to the flip side, how is Malthus wrong in the world today? We could say that, first of all, to identify why he's wrong, population and food production are not growing as Malthus predicted everywhere. There are places where they are growing in very different ways than what he predicted. What would explain this? Well, first of all, there is widespread use of contraception in more developed countries and MDCs. So we do see a drastically reduced total fertility rate in those places. We also see political, economic, or cultural policies or ideas that reduce population growth, that have encouraged people to have fewer children, successful policies that have dramatically reduced birth rates in countries like China and in South Korea, successful in the sense that they achieved the goal of reducing the population. Some countries are still in stage 4 or are at stage 4 and 5 of the DTM. They are experiencing either very low population growth or in some cases, negative population growth in stage 5. And we do see environmental degradation and soil loss that would contribute to some of the food production problems that Malthus predicted. But with regards to that, there are new farming techniques that might allow for us to grow more food than we ever grew in the past. So consider these ideas. We've got a rough sketch here of what would support Malthus's position and some of the things that would not support his position. Keep that in mind as you analyze this theory and theories to come. You will be challenged to see how they can be helpful in the world today and what their limitations are. What should you take away from today? Thomas Malthus' theory on population growth can help us understand the challenges of food production and population growth. He was unable to perfectly predict the advancements humans would make in food production and the slowing of population growth as countries moved through the DTM. Therefore, his theory does have value today, but it is limited by his historical perspective. Thank you for joining today, and remember, keep an eye out because geography is everywhere.
Hi, and welcome back to AP Daily. My name is Greg Hill. I teach at Dr. John D. Horn High School in Mesquite, Texas. Today we're going to talk about topic 2.7, population policies. In this video, we'll examine the types of population policies that promote or discourage population growth, mainly pronatalist and antinatalist policies. What will we learn? We'll look at population policies instituted by various governments across the globe. Before we start, let's look at a couple of root words. Natal. This relates to the time and place of one's birth. For example, have you ever been to a hospital and gone to a neonatal unit? Neo means new, natal meaning birth, so you have newborns. That's the newborn unit. Governments at various scales can cultivate policies to facilitate changes in birth rates. They can be pronatalist, where they want to promote births, antinatalist, to check births. When looking at antinatalist policies, you can often connect this back to Malthus when thinking of family planning. The idea is, with so many mouths to feed, we're going to eat ourselves into oblivion. Let's look at an example. How does the government of Finland support its newborns? First of all, each newborn is given a baby box. A baby box contains, as shown, a box with a mattress. Often this is a baby's first bed. Also included are baby clothes, diapers, and other supplies to help a newborn's family get their start. Both parents get 7 months of paid parent leave. Usually, the mother starts out the first 7 months, and then the last 7 months is the father staying home. Labor and delivery costs are subsidized by the government. In the United States, for example, a newborn born in the United States would cost a couple upwards of 14 to 20 plus $1,000, particularly without insurance. In Finland, the cost for labor and delivery for a newborn is about $375. Single moms receive the benefits of both parents, allowing for that single mom to enjoy 14 weeks of paid parent leave and at the same time has social and emotional support provided by the government. We can also look at pronatalist policies at the city scale. The city of Lestahärvela in Finland is a great example. In 2012, their crude birth rate dropped so low that they only had one child born that year. This sounded alarm all over the city. There was a fear of loss of population, a loss of business, and the closing of schools. The city enacted a new policy where mothers who give birth and reside in the town are paid 10,000 euros over 10 years. That equates to 1,000 euros per year. There are a few caveats. First, the parents and the child must live continuously in the city or the money stops. So, for example, if the parents were to leave and go to another municipality and then come back, the payments would not be reinstated. Let's look at other examples of pronatalist countries. Sweden offers 16 months of parental leave. Norway also offers some of the most robust parental leave on the planet. Germany offers incentives for fathers to stay home. Estonia offers monthly payments of about 300 euros per family. Japan, which has a declining and aging population, has instituted ad campaigns and offered subsidies to Japanese citizens to improve their birth rates. Now to antinatalist policies. Probably the most famous is China's one-child policy. Now, China has not always been an antinatalist country. They wavered back and forth from the 1950s post-World War II, where they lost a lot of their male population due to war. They were pro-natalist. In the mid 1950s, they became antinatalist as their urban population rapidly swelled. In the late 1950s, they flipped again and became pro-natalists. In the 1960s, China became an anti-natalist country as Malthusian concerns and the concept of it being your socialist duty to have fewer and fewer children. By the mid 1970s, the concept of Wan Shi Xiao, or later, longer, fewer, became the order of the day. In 1978, President Deng Xiaoping linked economic development with keeping the population at a certain level. The one child policy started out as an encouragement or a strong suggestion, mainly to Communist Party members and other government officials. The one child policy is based on a system of approvals. This can range from getting permission from your employer and also from a local neighborhood committee. If out of compliance, you're ordered to pay a social maintenance fee. For many Chinese millionaires and billionaires, they simply choose to pay the fee. Here are some exceptions. Minority groups are permitted 3 children as long as their population stays under 10 million. If the first child dies or is disabled, you're allowed to have a second child. If you have proper spacing, if the births are spaced out from 3 to 5 years, if both parents are only children, if the first child is adopted, for overseas Chinese who are living outside the country, and then rural families under what's known as a daughter hardship. Rural families tend to be more agrarian, and so boys are seen as an economic benefit over girls. What are some of the effects of the one child policy? First, is it led to a severe sex imbalance that we saw in the video where we just studied sex ratios. This is attributed to the preference for sons. Sons are seen as the economic movers of the family, and at the same time, they prolong the family name. This has led to what many scholars call China's lost girls through sex selective abortions, female infanticide, and female abandonment. At the same time, you've had a rise in violence against females. This has also led to a concept that many geographers and demographers call 4-2-1, where you have 4 grandparents, 2 parents, and 1 child. This has led to increased pressure on that one child to A, get good grades in school, and B, go to a great university, and C, get a great job. Because now they have to not only support themselves, but they're supporting their parents and in turn supporting their grandparents. This has led to China also having an aging population without supports, as they're having fewer and fewer children. There are not enough workers to put more money into the system to take care of their senior citizens. So China's instituted its what I call two-child policy. In 2015, they relaxed the one-child policy to allow for people to have 2 children. As a result, many people who were used to the one-child policy have remained dedicated to only having 1 child. There also has been a women's revolution where women are choosing either A, not to get married, or B, delaying marriage until later on in life after they've secured higher educational attainment and also career aspirations. Other antinatalist examples include India, where they have paid reproductive surgeries like vasectomies, and Nigeria, where they have government sponsored birth control. Let's practice. Which of the following explains an unintended consequence of China's antinatalist one child policy? Pause the video if you need some more time. The answer is C, a projected shortage of working age people to care for the rising elderly population, resulting in an increase in the cost of living for older people. Due to the fact that China does not have nursing homes, this has led to a rise in the cost of taking care of its elderly. What should we take away? Natalist policies have lasting effects on a country's economy, its culture, and also its politics. I want to give a special shout out to the Cougars at Cherokee Trail High School in Aurora, Colorado, and teacher Jay Benish. My name is Greg Hill, and this has been AP Daily. Thank you.